with and with me I have Ashley Sindone. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Ashley Sindoni. I'm the Family and Workforce Development Coordinator at Families Together. Thank you, TJ.
You're welcome. So today we have Kateri Surpass in the Buffalo region of OCFS office under Heather LaForme and is statewide. Kateri is also working on the foundations and wrapping up another presentation from the Home Finders Summit. So without further ado, Kateri Surpass, take it away.
Askenahet, Wakachanati Ganagihra, Kadri Yathat, Barada Diwak Nufnat, Wajihra Gisasate, Nujis Hat, Diwak Nana. So I'm just introducing myself in my language, which is Tuscarora. I am from the Tuscarora Reservation, which is located in the Niagara County area. So I just wanted to tell you my name. I'm Tuscarora. I'm also Bear Clan, and I am happy to be here, and I'm also happy that you are here as well. So I just wanted to thank you all for taking time out of your day and schedules to join me for this FPA training on building cultural humility and understanding when engaging tribal nations and Native American communities. So a question that we have is, what is cultural humility and how do we build it? So cultural humility is defined as an active, self-reflective, lifelong practice
Good
that
morning,
involves
everyone.
that involves continuous exploration of one's own and others' cultural identities and beliefs, awareness of personal biases, and treating others with respect and empathy. It emphasizes the importance of reducing power imbalances within relationships and communities. And additionally, it involves a willingness to learn from others and honor their beliefs, customs, and values. And so in this following presentation, FPAs will learn why tribal nations and Native American communities have established hard boundaries when it comes to working with service providers, agencies, and non-Native individuals from outside of our communities. We will focus on solutions to overcoming these boundaries, and we will explore to see what helps and what hurts when working with Native American families and how FPAs can begin to build trust with Native American communities. And so I just want to give a quick trigger warning. Some materials covered today may be difficult to hear, so I do encourage you all to take a break when you need to and rejoin. Suggestions that I give from our culture is that we take a drink of water, take some deep breaths. Then once you're feeling a little bit better, just rejoin the chat and also you can message TJ or Ashley as well. Just let them know that we're just stepping away, or if you need extra help. So we're going to be pausing for questions or just follow-ups, check-ins throughout the discussion today. And so does anyone have any questions so far? Good. I can't see everybody, sorry. Okay, so we can go on to the next slide, please. So facts or misconceptions. What have you learned? So growing up, we have all been taught basic Native American history that focuses on Native Americans as historic figures. Christopher Columbus encountering the indigenous people of the Americas, John L. Sullivan's term manifest destiny, where removal and relocation of tribes was necessary for the United States to expand. So what are some things that you all have learned about Native Americans while growing up or throughout your lifetime? And feel free to come off mute, or if you want to pop it in the chat. Nobody's learned anything about natives?
Well, I'm gonna jump in, which I'm native, obviously not from your tribe, but one of
Yeah.
those they said when the colonists came that some of our tribal peoples were cannibals. When
Mm.
he didn't have anything built, which is pretty obnoxious thing to say, but it's been said.
Right. So there is that viewpoint of when Christopher Columbus landed that we were all this youthful people that were savage as well, and that was when they had the Papa Bulls come over and say, if you're not Christian, you are not able to own land so for Christopher Columbus to discover America, like there were already over 500 nations here, and how can you discover something that wasn't lost, so that, yeah, it's just kind of unfathomable, but yeah, that's what is taught. And then also some of the things that I've heard is people are like, oh, Native Americans live in teepees, and we don't. In my culture, I'm Haudenosaunee, which is people of the longhouse, so we lived in longhouses, we didn't live in teepees. So all the different Native nations had different styles of home structures. It could be a wigwam. Even on the West Coast, there are the natives out there that have longhouses, but it's a different form than ours with different culture as well. And that's where you also find like the totem poles. So not every Native nation has totem poles in front of their houses, or, you know, um, another one I've heard is that all natives have the same religion, we all have the same culture, we all speak the same language, which is also untrue. And I'm just checking here. Native Americans have rituals and they believe in peaceful resolutions. Yes, we do have ceremonies. So in my Haudenosaunee culture and our beliefs, we have 13 ceremonies that we partake in every year within our longhouse. Um, we do honor the land, we honor animals, we honor everything in creation from the earth to the people all the way up to creator or Sawandiso Rawat Diatnet. That's how we refer to him. Um, Inca civilization was very advanced. They created the water system. Yep, there's a lot of different civilizations that had, even the Aztecs had like a complex irrigation, where they had like floating towns, like cities, the aqueducts, yes. Bartering and trading was part of our culture, and taking care of elderly and young, and that still is part of our culture today. Bartering and trading was also part of our downfall, with the diseases that came through. So when people on the coastlines were trading with the colonists and like the Europeans that were coming here, that was the way sickness traveled into deep into the villages, and wiped out with smallpox and different ran around indecent and nude. Yeah, that is a misconception. But people believe that. I still hear stories of people saying, yeah, we went to a sweat lodge and then ladies were dancing around with nothing on, and I mean, if that is happening, I'm sure it's like, yeah, that's not ceremonial at all. Um, Floating gardens and farms. Yes, that was with, like I was saying, the Incas and the Aztecs as well. And so another misconception too is like indigenous people, like more contemporary, is like native people are only from North America, so Canada and the United States. However, people are indigenous all the way down to Tierra del Fuego, all the way down to South Central America. You're going to find different indigenous groups and tribes. So quickly, I want to go over a misconception about wampum being money. And so what I wanted to talk about is that traditionally, um, Haudenosaunee people, that it was not wampum. Those were our treaties and our agreements. Um, so it kept record of our histories, our treaties, and agreements between different nations. And to this day, tribal nations on Long Island, so the Unkachunk and the Shinnecock, they still gather the whelk and quahog shells, and they get those from the Atlantic Ocean. And so they create white and purple beads. And so those beads are made to form the wampum belt. So the purple of the beads is actually where it's like the darkness, or because Haudenosaunee live in balance. And the white is like the truth and peace of it, of that agreement. So it's showing the balance of like the negative or the negativity that could be, and then the truth and balance of it all. And so it's important to identify and address misconceptions that you've learned. I have mentioned, again, this Wampa misconception as an introduction to the history of many of New York State tribal nations' governances. We will examine key wampum belts that will help us navigate historical boundaries with traditional nations, as well as examine contemporary tribal nation governments for that same purpose. We will explore a brief Native American historical timeline to gain a better understanding of historical events which have affected Native American relationships with the outside world. So we can move on to the next slide, please. So to begin, it would be beneficial for FPAs to recognize that there are 9 federally and state recognized tribal nations in New York State. So we have the Shinnecock Indian Nation and Unkachung Indian Nation, and those two are located on Long Island, and they are actually Algonquin nations. And so we had talked about how they help with the wampum, and the other nations are St. Regis Mohawk Tribe, Oneida Indian Nation, Onondaga Nation, Cayuga Nation, Tonawanda Seneca Nation, Tuscarora Nation, and Seneca Nation of Indians. So these are all the federally and New York State recognized tribal nations that are in New York. There are other nations, but we're just addressing the ones here. So I wanted to bring up that the last 6, so from St. Regis on down to Seneca Nations, those 6 are known as the Iroquois Confederacy. That's how most people have learned who we were in the history books. And so I just wanted to point out that the word Iroquois is actually a derogatory term that translates to striking snake. And our people prefer to be called Haudenosaunee, which means people of the Longhouse. And so when the French traders and the different Europeans were coming over, they would make friendships and allies with like our natural enemies or enemy tribes, nations. And so that's how they would refer to us. So then that's how the name Striking Snake came to be. So if you look on the photo, there's going to be a wampum here. So you'll see the white that I had mentioned, like the truth that is, and then there's also the purple that could, so this agreement is called the One Dish, One Spoon Wampum Belt, and it's been used since 1142 CE by Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. So it is symbolic of the hunting and the fishing and gathering and mutual benefits that we will share, and also like sustenance, so like berries and medicine plants. And this signifies that the nations that are in the Great Lakes area would come together with one bowl and one spoon to eat together to share everything, so that there are no sharp objects. So you're not going to see a fork, you're not going to see a knife, and that's because those objects could disrupt the unity and peace of this agreement. Does anyone have a question about the wampum that I've explained, or about the nations?
I'm sorry, could you repeat what the purple shells signify?
Yeah, so it's a balance, right? So the white is like our truth and peace, and the purple is like anything negative, or that could be because like we live in balance. And so these agreements, when we create these wampum belts, they're agreements between nations, but they're also under creator. And so we always uphold our side um of these agreements, so even though you see treaties that have been broken, it's usually been by the United States.
Yes. Thank you for
You're
repeating that.
welcome. Jennifer?
Jennifer and then Michelle.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Hi. So you mentioned that Haudenosaunee is the preferred name for the different nations. We live in Watertown, which is very close to the St. Regis Mohawk tribe.
Mhm.
Would the name Mohawk also be considered okay, or would Haudenosaunee be the more preferred name?
I would suggest going by what someone tells you, you know, so if someone says I'm Mohawk, you know, that's fine because these are all separate nations that have unified. And we're going to go into that in a moment. But these six separate nations that are Haudenosaunee are recognized and called by the outside world as Iroquois. And so a lot of Haudenosaunee people prefer to be called people of the Longhouse because it's more peaceful, but you're still going to find individuals who love the term Iroquois for whatever reason, and that's up to them. So, however they introduce themselves, just know that Iroquois is Haudenosaunee, and the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Tonawanda, and Tuscarora and Seneca are all Haudenosaunee or Iroquois. So, just given a little bit more in depth.
Okay.
Michelle?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I joined a little late and I didn't have my volume up enough. Could you just repeat the definition of Iroquois again? I just came in on the tail
Oh,
end of
yes.
that. I'm
So
sorry.
when the traders, the French traders and the different European um, nations came over, they had made different allies. So some of them would make allies with our natural enemies, and so our enemies wouldn't call us in a good way. So it was actually termed striking snake. So,
Think.
like, yeah, the Haudenosaunee people, we actually were very peaceful, you know, but we gave people three chances. And that's how it was explained to me is that if the tribes came and they stole our food or they made war on us, we're like, oh, they must have been really hungry, so we'll let this slide this time. And they come another time saying, "Oh, we're hungry and we were able to take from them so easily last time. Let's go back and do it again." You know, so then they would come back and take food and they'd say, you know, they must really, really be hungry. So let's just let them take the food and feed their families. But the third time they come back, they're like, okay, this is the third time. They should have prepared. They should have did things, you know, to prepare to feed their families and communities. Now we have to retaliate. And when they did, it was harsh and very like a striking snake, I believe. So that's why we got that name. So, yes,
Thank
we
you.
can move on to the next slide if there's no other questions. So, the Great Law of Peace, you will notice that this is another wampum belt, but it's not with the shells. But this wampum is symbolic of the Gotni, I can't even say it right now, Gotnihagoa, which is the Great Law of Peace. And so this is the foundation of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, or also known as Iroquois Confederacy. This agreement between the five original nations, the Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, and Mohawk, was established over 1,000 years ago, and it was to overcome the dark times that had settled over these nations. And it is one of the earliest forms of democracy in the world, and to this day promotes peace, power, righteousness throughout Six Nations Haudenosaunee. Tuscarora, we became the Six Nations in the Confederacy in 1722. And Haudenosaunee governance includes a Grand Council, which consists of chiefs from each nation. Am I here? I'm like, did it kick me out? I'm sorry. Can you hear me? I
Yeah,
hit,
We
now
can
you
hear you
do.
now.
oh my goodness. Okay. So, where did I leave off? Okay. Where did you hear me last? The Grand Council? Do we hear the
They
Grand Council?
had they
Okay.
had kicked out was the last words I heard.
Oh, they had kicked out. Let's see. Wait, where was I at? What we were talking about the Great Law piece though, correct? Okay. All right. So I'm just gonna start. So so it's Gotnihagoa. It's the Great Law of Peace, and so it was founded the foundation of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, Seneca, Cayuga, Oneida, and Mohawk, which you see pictured. So this was formed over 1,000 years ago, and it overcame the dark times that had settled over these original nations. It's the earliest form of democracy in the world and promotes peace, power, and righteousness throughout the Six Nations to this day. And the Tuscarora, we became the sixth nation in 1722. So the Haudenosaunee governance includes a Grand Council, which consists of chiefs from each nation with an emphasis on unity, collective decision making, and respect for all. So this system of checks and balances, representative governments, an emphasis on consensus decision making, which means every chief there had a voice and everyone was heard and they would work together to come to one decision. So the Onondaga, Tonawanda, Seneca, and Tuscarora nations are still the only three that hold on to traditional governance and sovereignty to this day. So, out of those six nations, only three maintain the original traditional governance. Let me see where my chat went to. Okay. And so, a tip for FPAs is an interesting fact is that the United States government is modeled after the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. And so that was acknowledged. I can't remember where, but they did finally acknowledge that. Is there any questions about the Great Law piece? Can I hear? Hold on 1 second.
Can you say more about what it means that Tonawanda, like the three that aren't part of this?
Yeah. So with the Tonawanda Seneca, Tuscarora, and Onondaga, those are the three nations that maintain their sovereignty and they maintain their traditional governments from before. So out of all the 500 nations, those are the three that still maintain. And so like Tuscarora, we're proud of that, and it's just that we have our clan mothers in place, we have our chiefs in place, we have our faith keepers. We still maintain that government system that the United States has used. So if you look at the United States, you're going to see the president is a chief, and just the different Senate and the Congress and everything, and it's the people, and it's the people that have the power, and the people tell our clan mother what the issues are within their families, within their clans, within the nation, and then the clan mothers listen, and the clan mothers talk with each other, and then they let the chiefs know as well, what those decisions are, and from there the chiefs are bringing forth what the people want, which the clan mothers have looked at, and so that's how we still do. Where in contemporary times it's like an elected system where the nation's people are electing their representatives, and then they have elections. So just similar to America. Yeah.
Thank you so
So
much for
you're
explaining that.
welcome.
That's fascinating.
And it's like a lot of information to learn, and I don't claim to know everything, but my strength is that I grew up Haudenosaunee with a strong Tuscarora grandma. I had to learn a lot in my 20s, so it's been a lifelong journey trying to figure out as a mom, who am I to raise Tuscarora Bear children, and I didn't take that lightly. So I really learned about our sustenance, our food growing, our governance. I have different elders, and I have networks across different nations through Oklahoma to Texas and even out west. I have people that I get information from and learn from, because all nations are different, but it's always good to learn and respect anyone that you come from across, because they don't have to have a nation. They can just be a person. We're all human beings at the end of the day, and we all deserve to be treated with kindness and empathy and basic human dignity, no matter who you are. So we can go on to the next slide. I'm just trying to keep mind of the time as well, because I would like to have questions at the end. So two-row wampum is called the Gaswenta. And so this was created in 1614 and is symbolic of Haudenosaunee sovereignty. And I'm going a lot heavily on the wampums just because the majority of nations in New York State are Haudenosaunee. So a lot of the basis of everything is coming from these agreements and treaties. And so it's really important to know these when stepping into the different nations, so then you're understanding like why this boundary exists and why, historically it came into being. And so this treaty belt represents Haudenosaunee and Dutch relationship, and it was supposed to be, the Dutch wanted it to be father to son. And we said, no, 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 it's brother to brother. So the belt is symbolic of two vessels. So if you notice, the white is symbolic here of a river and the water in between. And the purple is symbolic of a canoe and a ship. They're going side by side, steady down the river together. However, Native people maintain our values, rights, customs, and ways, and the same for Europeans, and anyone else coming to our lands. They make their own laws. Um, they will not interfere with internal affairs of one another. And so this agreement has been declared like a peaceful coexistence, and it has also been kept by the Haudenosaunee to this date. So again, just reiterating that wampum belts are not money, but they are treaty agreements between nations. And Tiffany?
I think
Uh,
you just answered my question because and it may have been a silly question, but I was just wondering, are they worn? Are they held? And then you said belts, so they are worn?
no, they're not
Okay.
worn. They are actually kept up, and they're only brought out at certain times, so they have people who take care of them, they have people who repair them. There's so many different belts that have been made with different treaties, and some are in museums still. I had been told a story where our original Hiawatha belt was on display in a museum, but it was in really bad conditions. And so the clan mothers of the different nations went there to say, we're here to look at the Hiawatha belt. And they're like, oh, here it is. We're like, well, we want to see it in the back room, and they accessed it, and they came with scissors, and they came with everything, and they took it apart, and they hurried up and put it back together before because we didn't want to see our agreement, our wampum, sitting in such state of disrepair and like dishonor. So that was a story that I was told that was like powerful to me. And so a lot of our stories and a lot of teaching that I get is from like different clan mothers, even clan mothers that have passed away and that are not with us anymore, or different chiefs that have had so many stories to tell. So I always encourage myself and anyone, and the children especially, to go visit elders. And these are our histories, these are our stories. And a lot of people would just look at this and not know what it means. And is it a piece of a wardrobe? Is it money? Is it, what is that? So that's why I think it's important to educate people on the different treaties, and letting what the relevance of that is. And there's a lot of people who like to not share, but I believe that it's good to create allies and create educated individuals who are coming into our territories, to help us, and we can make stronger friendships that way. And maybe, we have like so many different wampums. But for tips, please note the importance of service providers, agencies, and FPAs in adhering to any procedures or protocols when you're scheduling or attending visits on Native Nation territories, or tribal nation territory, sorry. Please understand that you are leaving New York State and you're entering a sovereign nation's territory. So it's best to reach out to the nation's leadership or to find out what the procedures are before visiting a family who resides on the territory. And another way you can do this is by reaching out to service agencies that are on. So you might have to do homework yourself, and Google and find out like who's the closest to you, or even ask the people that you're working with, what nation do you belong to, who's your leader, do you have a contact. You can ask these questions because you're just saying, I'm just trying to reach out to see if we can find other support services that's on territory for you that might be beneficial for you and your family. And they're not going to say no, because there's going to be health clinics out there, there's going to be language, there's going to be culture, there's going to be all kinds of different services out there. There could even be like in my community, we also do from time to time like the vegetable gardens, so you might want to get involved and go out and grow vegetables and become part of that group, and where they distribute, the crops at the end. So always know before you go out, just make sure that you check in with a service agency and find out what the protocols are for you to enter and visit families. Like you don't want to just show up to someone's address and then find out like they're not going to let you in, or they're going to call the police, or they're going to, have some resistance. So that's any questions? I'm just looking. Good morning, Lanita. Um, this TJ, so we taught colonizers how to govern
have a
and yet
quick
honor
question.
democracy. Oh, go right
I
ahead.
was trying to raise my hand. I had a family, and her daughter, she had a lot of incidents occurred at school, and she always said, I have to consult my tribe. What does her going to her tribe, um and I think it's the tribe that you named. I don't want to mispronounce it. And
Mhm.
she said I would have to talk to the leaders um, regarding her daughter and the services that the school was saying, like the IEPs, different things, counseling and stuff like that. What can you share? Can you give a little
Yeah,
insight on that?
so depending on what nation it is, like I was saying, there's the clan mothers who are the ones who are helpful to families with any family matters, any clan matters, any nation matters. So like for me, I hold my clan mother up really high. And so anytime I'm going through something where I need advocacy, I would have her accompany me to the meetings and have her accompany to school. Like I've been through it with IEPs, with schooling, with my son as well. And I would have as many clan mothers, as many leaders come, because the school that my child was located on was on my nation. And so they weren't allowing me to have advocacy in, because they said we're New York State and you can't have your leaders here. And so then I had tried to have a state advocate come in, and they said, no, that's New York State and we're on your territory, so you can't have them come in here. And I was like, wait, I'm bringing my clan mothers in now, and the chiefs, and we're all going to talk. So it's important, because we have different services, we have different grants, we have different American Indian Health, which is another form of healthcare, so we might have different services available to help with mental health or with schooling. So it's always good to get the nation's input as well, especially, yeah, so especially with somebody who is close with their nation and they're requesting them to be present, I would honor that. And
Oh,
I'm just going to move on to Jennifer and the
thank
question we
you.
have. Oh, you're welcome. So Jennifer says we have been invited to the St. Regis Mohawk tribal lands to provide educational advocacy and have a great relationship with the Tribal Education Center there. They have been wonderful with educating us on culture and how to address members. That's amazing, and that's great to hear. I'm really excited when I can witness and see these different relationships developing in a positive way. So thank you for sharing that, Jennifer. I'm going to move to the next slide. So, this is Native American history, and I'm kind of going to go through these in a nutshell, kind of lump. And any questions that you may have, you can put them in the chat. I'm just going to try to go through this part quickly, and then we're going to have a discussion afterwards. So, Native American history in 1830 to 1883. So, in 1830, let's see. So to truly understand the mistrust that Native Americans have for hold on one second, for outside agencies, I can't speak today. We must examine key points in Native American history that were not included in American history class. Most are familiar with the Indian Wars and Manifest Destiny, as we talked about earlier, or that territorial expansion of the United States to move westward. Um, So we may also be familiar with the Indian Removal Act and the Trail of Tears. So many Native American tribes from the east were forced to relocate from their traditional homelands with all of their families to Oklahoma and other areas west of the Mississippi River. Traveling conditions were harsh with little to no food, and many infants, children, elders, and weaker individuals did not make that journey. So that was the Trail of Tears. And so even at times like there wasn't even time to bury, you know, so there was a lot of crying that had happened. And I know there is like the Trail of Tears routes from like North Carolina, from Florida, from you know all those eastern coast, you know, people that were made to move so that way it would open up for people to settle, you know, from the United States. And up here in this area, a lot of native tribal nations were like, no, we've been here, we don't want to go, you know. So you'll find a lot that weren't, but you will find that there are some Oneida in Wisconsin, and you'll find other native nations from the Haudenosaunee that have also went into Canada. But that had happened before with Joseph Brand, and I believe it was like the Revolutionary War. I am like a history buff. My son is going to school to become a history teacher. So like I kind of, yeah. So moving along to 1851, there was Indian Appropriations Act. And so Congress passed this act, which created the Indian reservation system. Native tribes were then moved on to farming reservations in hopes of keeping the Indians under control. In traditional Native American culture, children were central to family and community, and it was quickly realized that they were the key to decimating Native American culture. It was simply to remove the children from the family. And so that prevented the development of our future leaders, our ceremonial faith keepers, our ceremonial people who would hold the ceremonies, our language speakers, and traditional storytellers. Um, it prevented the ability for parents to parent and grandparents to instill traditional parenting and cultural teachings to our next generations. So that was detrimental to us. In 1879, General Richard Henry Pratt founded the Carlisle Indian Industrial School at Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, many Native American children were forcibly removed from their families and attended one of many boarding schools throughout the United States as it was mandatory. So a lot of the the Native children in New York State went to two boarding schools. One was Carlisle in Pennsylvania, as I mentioned. My grandmother's mother and father went to those schools. So a lot of Native American families that you encounter, one of their grandparents, one of their family members have more than likely attended these schools, and so they still feel those ripples from those places. Um, this is kind of triggering, you know, it is for me, you know, just because I know what my great grandparents had to survive to be in this world for us to be here. But it was mandatory, like I was saying, and so these children were taken away from their families. They were sent to these schools. They were stripped of our traditional clothing. They had our haircut. Um, they were assimilated into American culture. They were given a place to stay and live, like room and board. And a lot of people think boarding schools, residential schools is like elite and it was a good place to go. And it wasn't, because these children had endured all different types of abuse. You know, they had physical, mental, spiritual, sexual abuse that they had to endure. They were denied to speak our language. They were denied to have any part in our ceremonial practices. They were fiercely punished. You know, whenever they would do that, their names were taken away, their traditional names. They were assigned a number. They were given a Christian name out of the Bible. Most of the kids had a number. And if children were found to be involved in activities, again, they faced extreme punishments. So quality education consisted of girls being trained as maids and waitstaff, while boys were taught to be farmers, or they also went into the military. So those were the two things that they were doing. Children were sent out as cheap labor to work farms and to be maids for the local families, and that money that they brought in went back to the school. Um, so not all children who attended these establishments made it home safe to their families. A lot of um, the staff or the nuns or the priests were very harsh with punishment and the different abuses that they doled out to the children. So children would die of abuse, neglect, and malnutrition and sickness, and many lay in unmarked and marked graves around the school. And those graves are the proof that all children who were taken never came home. And so imagine, having your child taken out of your home where they're loved and learning the language and they're thriving, and government official comes in and says, "Hey, they gotta go here," and they take your child, and they could be as young as 2 or 3, and these children, would endure abuses, and um, if you even have been paying attention to the news media since like 2021, they have been uncovering these different burial sites, and not enough is being said about that. So. Um, yeah, there's been movements. We have like the Orange Shirt Day, Every Child Matters. Those are all stemming from the residential schools that there seems to be a lack of knowledge of. A lot of people are like, how come I've never heard of residential schools? How come they don't teach this in history? Or, oh, it's so long ago, you should just get over it. So these are all different things that I've heard, but I myself, I like to wear my orange shirt, and I like to go out and be active, and just support where I can and how I can. So 1883, the Code of Indian Offenses was a body of legislation where Congress banned Native dances, ceremonies, and practices. These efforts were made to integrate Native Americans into American mainstream society and to civilize and culturally assimilate Native Americans to a white standard of culture and religious practice. The Code of Indian Offenses operated under the jurisdiction of the U.S. government agents assigned to the reservations. This allowed the Indian agents to interfere in the Native American criminal justice. Many Native Americans took the ceremonies and languages underground during this time to protect them from being eradicated. So this was the beginning of cultural gatekeeping. Cultural gatekeeping is when traditional knowledge holders refuse to pass the teachings to the younger generations or outsiders in fear of it being misused, abused, or appropriated. Any questions from this time frame that you might have? I can take one or two really quick. You just learned about it from 1923. Yes, Yellowstone does a good job. I'm not into Westerns, because cowboys and Indians, but like I really like Yellowstone because they do have Native Americans and they do portray them in like accurate settings where it kind of makes me upset watching. But
I
yeah.
mean, I can't imagine, because it's upsetting, just for me to watch. So, but I'm glad to know that it's, fairly accurate.
Yes, a lot of it is, and so it does make your heartstrings just kind of, and your jaw kind of clench.
Absolutely.
You're like, oh my goodness. I'm looking. They did this. They did the same thing in Australia. They did, and there's a movie called Rabbit Fences. That's about the Australian residential schools, and then they also did it in Canada. So the United States started it and they just kept perfecting it as they took it. And so even though America was harsh, Canadian was harsher, and Australia was bad as well. Um, there's another one that's really hard to find called Where the Spirit Lives, and that's what actually drew my attention as a young person into the residential school history. And that's when I started becoming more involved and wanting to know more about Native history and what they didn't tell. The elders told us many things you won't learn in a book in a school. That's true. And often from the Hawaiian Native American to African Americans, we are told to get over it. We were lied to about our history. We were. We were totally like, there's so much that is left out of history. The fact that some elders held on and continue to share with the youth, the community to help with healing is amazing. Tasmania was completely wiped out. Oh my goodness. So there's like stories that I don't even get to, but history is fascinating and it is horrifying, Jennifer. Like it's something good to know because it helps with your learning of like what was and how has led to the path today, you know. And so I'm gonna move to the next slide. Thank you for all your questions and comments. I appreciate them. So continuing on our timeline, 1924 was the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924. So on June 2nd, 1924, Native Americans became citizens of the United States with the Indian Citizenship Act. Congress declared any indigenous persons born within the United States or are U.S. citizens, except for the Onondaga and the Iroquois Haudenosaunee nations. These nations that I have mentioned never accepted the authority of the United States to make six nations become citizens of the United States. The three treaties held 1784 Treaty of Fort Stanwix, 1789 Treaty of Fort Armor, and the 1794 Treaty of Gunadagua clearly recognized the Haudenosaunee as separate and sovereign nations. Accepting the U.S. citizenship would be treason to their own nations and a violation of the treaties and a violation of international law as recognized in 2007 United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People. So all of the different native tribes had received citizenship except for the six nations that we had mentioned, the Iroquois, Haudenosaunee. So from 1958 to 1967, there was the Child Welfare League of America, the CWLA, and the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs Indian Adoption Project. And so for purposes of placing Native American children with white families, this was an effort to continue to assimilate Native children into mainstream culture through the destruction of Native families. Unfortunately, this resulted in several generations of Native American children losing their cultural identities. During this time, child protection practices resulted in the needless removal of Native children from their homes based solely on poverty. The central role of tribal nations and extended families and protecting the best interests of the child was not understood nor respected. Many Native American tribes, families, nations viewed Child Protective Services, CPS, as the new boarding schools. So, looking at the many ways that Native children have been historically removed from their homes, families, and traditional communities, culture, and language, it is clear to see that the effects it has had on their mental health. So these are quotes. So these children have experienced alarming rates of chemical dependency, suicide, mental illness. They, their families, and their tribes have never fully recovered from the broken relationships, broken ties to culture, and lost years. So tips for FPAs. In a keynote speech in April of 2001, Shay Bilchek, the director of CWLA, apologized for CWLA's role in these adoptions, stating, no matter how well intentioned or how squarely in the mainstream this was at the time, it was wrong, it was hurtful, and it reflected a kind of bias that surfaces feelings of shame as we look back with 2020 vision of hindsight. Moving on to 1978. On August 11, 1978, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act became law, which I didn't list there. Oh, I did. It's at the top. Sorry. The law was enacted to return basic civil liberties to American Indians, Alaska Natives, Alouettes, and Native Hawaiians to allow them to practice, protect, and preserve their inherent right of freedom to believe, express, and preserve traditional religious rites, spiritual, and cultural practices. And also in 1978, we see November 8th, the Indian Child Welfare Act was enacted to protect the best interest of Indian children and to promote the stability and security of Indian tribes and families by the establishment of minimum federal standards for the removal of Indian children and place of such children in homes which will reflect the unique values of Indian culture. ICWA provides guidance to states regarding handling of child abuse and neglect in adoption cases involving Native children and sets minimum standards for the handling of these cases. Could we move on to the next slide? We're going to be doing an FPA check-in. There it is. And I have some questions for you all to think about. Um, so you can either raise your hand or put your answers in the chat. We can go over them. So, how has history created boundaries between tribal nations and the outside world?
Um, I think one thing for me that stands out is that, like, not knowing, right, or understanding the history. And so therefore not understanding the hesitation to
Mhm,
engage with our systems, right? And I say "our" very loosely.
mhm.
Um, but like, of course it makes sense that, that they don't trust, that nations don't trust outsiders because historically, you wouldn't. And so just sort of respecting that and honoring it, really.
Yes, that's a good point there. Just to be able to understand what the history was, to be respectful, and to hold that place for them, and create a space where these relationships can happen, and develop in a good way. Um, Breaking trust with a history of complete disregard of another's belief in history. Yeah, so there's a lot of mistrust that helps create those boundaries between the tribal nations and outside. Tiffany?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that the history created the boundaries basically because there's no trust that anybody that comes in is not going to take their children. Like that seems to be the one of the main things that I took out of that is they just kept taking all the kids. Like I they've got to be all terrified that that's going to continue to happen.
Yeah, that's like the main thing. And as we were talking in the beginning, that the children were everything to our nations. They're our future leaders, our future parents, our future everything. And we mold them. They're like, so traditionally, we're made from clay in our creation stories. And so we're molded in the image of Creator, and so we mold the children as they're developing as well, like clay, into our leaders, into who we need in our communities. And we have outsiders coming in, stealing our children, cutting them off from fulfilling those roles. That's like taking away our future leaders and everything, and parents, grandparents, like all different roles are equally important. Just because you're a leader doesn't mean you're any more than a child. Carrie?
And if you look, in a lot of ways, the same things are still happening, maybe not to, natives or indigenous people, but the way that we whitewash history, the way that, even during slavery, we remove children from their parents. So even if they were there, they didn't get the oral history from their parents of what the history of their peoples were, etc. You see it in schools now, even to this day, where kids are empowered differently to disregard certain rules, disregard certain boundaries, and parents will be reported to CPS if there's different things that the systems don't agree with parenting, etc. So we're still doubling down in a lot of ways in the caucasity of it all. We're
Yeah.
still doubling down on it. So
Yes, and I appreciate all your comments. And it's still hard, because like there's always that fear of someone coming in to take your children. And even in the fact where Native people don't even trust each other. You'll see people saying, "Oh, don't tell my clan mother, don't tell my nation that I'm involved in CPS. They're going to take my kids," and that's everyone's fear. And growing up, when we were little, it's just instilled in us. Whenever someone knocks on a door that you don't know, you all hide. You hide the kids, and I don't know if any other culture does that, but we grew up doing that. My kids did it. It was just something that we did, and they like my kids thought it was a game, and I'm like, "Oh no, this is from us running and hiding because we didn't know if it was like a government official or somebody outside coming to take our children." And the first thing you do is tell kids hide, which is scary. Um, I am just acknowledging Irene Torres. This is a really hard subject, and it's very difficult. If you need to get a drink of water, take a breath. Like water's medicine, and it will help keep things moving. Um, history of whitewashing is, where am I at? Mind-boggling and so awful. If I'm missing anyone, I'm sorry. Empires fall from within, not outside. Unfortunately, there is a movement to turn the clock back and whitewash again here more, and that is, I do see that. We just have to keep going on and trying to do the best we can in our jobs and with our children. And I think that we as people are more powerful than we think because we are the ones that are the examples and we are the ones that are the examples for our children and we show them how to be kind human beings, you know. So I think if there's more kind human beings in the world than there is the other, that, you know, we can make a difference. It's about systemic oppression and it's mostly for minority. Yes, I do overstand hiding from authorities. Yes, so that was just a take back from my childhood. And the other question that I have is how can FPAs use Native American history to build trust with Native American communities? I'm just gonna take two and move on just for time's sake. Jennifer?
One thing that we have focused on when we're working at the St. Regis Mohawk Reservation is speaking with some of the different service systems that are already on the tribal lands and asking them to help us properly pronounce words and phrases and just having a very basic understanding of, how to say, welcome, thank you, things like that, so that we're at least using consistent cultural language and being able to have conversations with terminology that people will understand.
That's awesome. Like even beginning with language and even knowing how to say someone's name is like everything, you know, and just building that trust can be as simple as understanding how to say someone's name and taking the time and space to say that. Like I have a native name too. It's Mohawk. I'm Tuscarora, but my dad was Mohawk, you know, and so my cousins named me in the Mohawk way. And so my mom forgot how to say it, so my mom even mispronounces my name. You know, she calls me Kateri, but it's supposed to be Gatali or Gayeri, depending on which Mohawk nation you come from. So it's really unique. I'm just gonna look over here, learn the history and culture as well as use their tribal supports to assist the families. From Melinda. Yes, thank you so much. That's important to learn history and get to know culture. You know, get to know these family support systems. You know, like that are not just in New York State, but what's available on territories as well. Because there are, like I'm saying, clinics. There's cultural centers. There's language centers. There's schools. We can move on to the next slide. So going through traditional Haudenosaunee governance. So this is going to pertain to those three, the Tuscarora, Onondaga, and Tonawanda Seneca. Um, so traditional Haudenosaunee governance, there's a council, and I do want to say that it goes beyond that because even though you work with nations who have elected systems, they still have a traditional council system usually, and those are the chiefs and the clan mothers, and they will go to council. Every Haudenosaunee nation is represented there. There is a method in council for debating the policies with all of the chiefs that are present. Final decisions have to be consistent with Great Law, which was the Gotten that we had talked about earlier. And this is a picture of an actual wampum of the Great Law, the Hiawatha wampum belt. And so there's also Grand Council, which consists of 50 chiefs from all the clans across all nations. And we have chiefs who had mentioned earlier, and the chiefs are actually put in place by the clan mothers, and they have to. I'm gonna go to this here. So the chiefs they hold a distinction and serve and is accountable to the nation. Chiefs are male leaders of the clans who are representatives in Grand Council, and they are caretakers of the peace, and they are chosen and installed by Clan Mother for life. So the chief must uphold his duties given to him upon being raised up as a chief. Chiefs' hearts must be full of peace and goodwill, and their minds filled with the yearning of the welfare of people of the Confederacy. And so that's a lifelong commitment unless he's not doing his duties and he's warned 3 times, like I had mentioned earlier. The clan mothers, um, when they're choosing a chief, they will choose the men who are honest, reliable, clear-headed, with knowledge of Confederacy laws and values. Clan mothers must not gossip, they must possess honorable qualities that make them true mentors for the people. Clan mothers have the authority to remove a chief if he's not acting for the benefit of the people, and the clan mother will give that chief 3 warnings. So the clan mothers also have their clan members, the nation members, best interest in mind, and they do assist with family and children matters. Um, so I'm going to move on to the next one, unless there's any questions really quick. I think we're ending at 11:30, right? So I'm just trying to get through.
Yes,
Contemporary.
11:30.
Okay, so let me go through. Okay, contemporary tribal nation governments. So these are the nations that all the other nations that we had mentioned, just those 3 that I had said earlier, still maintain that the traditional governance. But these other nations in New York State, the Algonquin nations, the other Seneca, Cayuga, Oneida, all of those ones would be established constitutions. They have multi-branch systems of governments, the tribal representatives, tribal councils. They do have elections and voting. They have judiciary branches, codes of laws. They carry out laws, ordinances, and resolutions. They preserve culture, values, and traditions. And overall, all these tribal nation governments have the well-being of their people at mind. And so you're going to see a lot of differences in the contemporary, but that's going to be like the basis of that they're all there to make sure that their people are being taken care of. And I am not really familiar with all of the different elected government systems so much. Like I had said, I know more about the traditional government system, but it's best to find out who the different nation leaders are and just know that if it's a contemporary government, is also probably a tribal government, like a tribal nation traditional government as well, where you'll have your elected system, and then you're also going to have your clan mothers and chiefs, and people may utilize both of them. But in New York State, those would be the nations that they, not the nations, the governments that New York State acknowledges would be those contemporary. So the Unkachunks, Shinnecox, Oneida, Cayuga, Seneca Nation of Indians. Those would be, I think I got most of them, the ones with elected systems, but they also may have that. I just want to make that very clear. They might have those clan mothers that they're still trying to bring in if they have family issues because it's still existing. So we can move on to the next slide. So we're going to go over modern reservation living. So we do have the tribal nation leadership, which may or may not be traditional or elected. Many are under the impression that if you visit a reservation, you will find Native Americans living in teepees without running water, plumbing, or modern conveniences. That is a misconception. When visiting a reservation, there will usually be signs posted that you are entering a tribal territory. There are paved and unpaved roads. There are trailers, homes, nation buildings, businesses, schools, and various levels of incomes and quality of living. Some homes may or may not have running water and plumbing. Many houses have septic systems and wells, as many communities do not have the water structure set up, or sewage or gas lines. Houses may use electric, propane, oil, or wood stoves as sources of heat. Not everyone has internet access. That's like really, and if you do have internet access, it's really spotty in some places. As we explored earlier, tribal nations have some form of leadership in place, whether it's traditional or contemporary. Tribal nation leadership handles family, community, and nation concerns. It is best to reach out to find what the nation's protocols are before visiting, like I had mentioned before. Um, Approaching with services that are located off territory. So depending on the relationship the tribal nation has in New York State, it is best to verify if your agency can provide the services to tribal members. So on a traditional reservation like mine on Tuscarora, you would, if you're state agency, you would have to have permission coming in. So anyone from Indian Health Services, CPS, any state agency would have to reach out to leadership and make arrangements for how they're coming on. And so if it's for CPS, the nation will either have a clan mother or a representative for the clan mother to go along with you to those, because they're going to have to watch how the meeting's going, and they also have to report back to their clan mother so the clan mother can make her decision on how to work with CPS, because they still have an active role in families, and clan mothers are familiar with the different services locally and on the territories. So it's best to include the nation wherever you can. And that goes back to the earlier question that we had as well. So in the community centers, we have culture, language, and historians. And so these are like groups of individuals who work together to preserve our culture, language, and history. Um, they there are also groups who work together to host annual gatherings, picnics, field days, feasts, socials, ceremonies, and powwows. And as a guest, because that's how you're considered when you come to the boundaries and you're asking permission to come onto a territory, you're coming as a guest. And so you have to conduct yourself in a manner that's respectful. Um, there are different events that you can attend. I know there was a question asked about if there were drumming ceremonies that you could attend, but ceremonial practices are usually closed to tribal nation members only. And even some ceremonies are closed to certain societies. So there's even tribal members that can't get into some ceremonies. Um, so guests are usually allowed to attend lacrosse games, because we do have a lot of lacrosse going on with like the little leagues and stuff like that. We also have like picnics, powwows, and they're usually advertised publicly on social media. So if you see those going around and saying, "Oh, come join us for a social dance with dinner to follow," or dinner before, like you could go to those. These are safe spaces for guests to learn and ask questions in a respectful manner, and you can also purchase any items that are made by tribal nation members, and you can enjoy the traditional foods. So families, community, and service agencies and tribal nation communities consist of extended families residing in the same home. It's not uncommon for a family to have different grandparents, aunts, uncles, extended family, cousins all living together. And it's not uncommon to see non-native family members living in these homes as well, because women will marry non-native men, the native men will marry non-indigenous women as well. And so um, we have vast, extensive families. Families may also consist of single parents, kinship placements, foster care families as well. It's important to remember that if it's a Haudenosaunee tribal nation, there's a great chance that there's a clan mother who is aware of these families, and they are working in some capacity to support the family. So always, always try to ask the family, do they have a clan mother that they want to, talk to or include? They have anyone in their community that they feel comfortable working with you. So a tip is to research tribal nation you're intending on providing services to, and reach out to the leadership and community services. And I keep saying that because it's really important to know the procedures and protocols for conducting business on tribal nation territories with the members. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. I'm sorry. So, living off tribal nation territory, tribal leadership still can be involved, because if you're an enrolled member living off the tribal nation, you still will be able to have services and grants and for education. Like the tribal leadership doesn't stop caring about their members just because they're living off territory. So it's always good to find out if they are enrolled, who they can contact for supports. Again, just like living on territory. Um, so as an FPA, it's easier to navigate services for these families who live off territory. So they can be Native American enrolled, or they can also be descendant families, which means that they might not be enrolled, but they still, identify as, and they still have that right to culture and language. They still have that right to see if there's any grants of education or services that they can get. So for Indian Health Services, American Indian Health Services for Health, it's always good to know who they belong to as a nation, so you can get those services if possible. So Native American families and individuals don't always look Native; they can appear as non-Native. It's important not to assume and find out if families are identifying as Native American, or especially if they're enrolled. Um, their tribal nation will still keep their well-being in mind, and that does not stop because they live off the territory. CPS gets involved with these families. Tribal nations still has the right to protect their nation's children under ICWA. It is best to reach out to the Office of Family and Children Services, OCFS, for Native American Services if you need assistance in helping a family determine tribal nation identity. So in urban settings, they're going to have um, a disconnection, a lot of families, maybe some, because of all of the removals we talked about. They might not have access to language, they might not have access to culture, the stories or histories, and so that could be causing, the feelings of like mental health and depression. And, a lot of people move off reservation because there's not enough housing. So it could be as simple as that, and there's just not anywhere for them to live out on a reservation or a territory. And so keep in mind that there are higher levels of alcohol, drug, and suicide attempts in Native American communities, and that deep despair and also that longing to reconnect. So keep referrals for mental health, alcohol, and drug counseling and treatments on hand. Meet them where they are and help them as they will allow you to. There's going to be maybe a slight moment where they let you in, and it's up to you to help guide how much that door opens, or closes. So there are community centers and service agencies that are located within larger cities. They will have also the language and the culture and history there as well. So these centers can help individuals reconnect. They might also have socials and powwows as well. They also have programming for youth and elders. You just have to reach out and even Google search, what's in your area. As an FPA, it's best to research what Native American services and supports are in your local area. Create listservs and resources to keep on hand. So we can move to the next slide. Okay, so identifying existing boundaries. So one of the boundaries is gatekeeping that we had talked about earlier. Gatekeeping is when the people who have the information, the culture, the language, all the knowledge, and they keep it. So then that way, it's not being misused or abused or appropriated. And so they have this deep seated don't share, don't tell anyone because of that mistrust that, that's been developed over all these years of history. There's also that miscommunication, a lack of clear communication and misunderstandings when it comes to language or culture. Previous experience with outside agencies. So they might have experienced disrespect and judgment from rude or uneducated agency members or workers, and it can make it difficult for Native Americans to let their guards down. The quality of life and living, reservation living can be difficult and not up to what New York State agency workers or FPAs are used to experiencing, and Native Americans may feel judged for that. Mental health, there are many Native Americans who will not seek out mental health counseling. They choose to suffer instead of being labeled. Many are coping with addictions and don't know that services exist. There are others who view hospitals in a negative light, and the word hospital literally translates in some languages as a place they go to die, so who wants to go there? Like who wants to go for mental health services and like, oh, you got to go to the hospital for that? No, thank you. So, I had a video. I think we can maybe try to put the link in the chat if they want to watch after, but I just want to go through and talk solutions. So if we could skip to the solutions page and do the check-in just because we're running short. Oh, it's gonna go into the video.
1 second.
Are we able to drop that link in so they can watch
Yeah,
like
one.
afterwards? It's a really good video that shows contemporary times of, and again, I'm Haudenosaunee, so that's how I'm, how I raised and know the most about. So it's not that I'm partial, it's just that I need to do more learning on myself on Algonquin culture, which I am. We have Veronica from Uncle Nation that I work with, so I reach out to her to try to become educated on her nation as well. So let's talk solutions. Um, let's identify some solutions and best practices that will help build trust in communications with tribal nations and Native American communities within New York State. So build trust and understanding. Acknowledge historical trauma and impacts of colonizations while creating real connections. Know the history. So again, research the tribal nations that you're working with. Find out what their relationships with non-natives look like. Respect cultural protocols and and sovereignty. How does tribal nation view appropriate communication, gift giving, or other cultural practices? Recognize and respect the tribal nation's rights to self-determination and their inherent right to sovereignty. So we're going to be engaging early and often. Invite tribal nation partners and agencies in at the beginning of any initiative instead of at the end. It's better for you to include them early on and get their thoughts, because if you're making decisions and you're not including them, what your final outcome maybe can be completely different and not even what they would ever have agreed to, or and it'd be cool to see like the different cultural and different resources that they have available. Oh, good, it's in there. So after, if you guys want to take a look at that, that it's a really good video. Um, so be transparent and accountable. Be clear with communication. How are your decisions being made? How are tribal nations being involved? Utilize Native American organizations, service agencies on reservations, and they're also located in Native communities. They are familiar with families and their needs of all the community members. They also have resources geared to Native American populations and know how to contact leadership. Listen, learn, and seek advice. Be open to learning from Native Americans and tribal nations. Adapt your approach as needed. And don't be afraid to reach out to Native American organizations, service agencies, tribal nation leaders, if necessary, for guidance in learning procedures, protocols, and best practices of tribal nations and Native American communities. And I want to do a quick FPA check-in for the next screen, if we can move ahead. Oh, I think we're going to do it. We're going to get you guys out of here in time. So FPA check-in. If you want to put your answers in the chat, how can FPA bridge communication and collaboration with tribal service providers? Victoria? Oh, go ahead, Victoria.
Oh, thank you.
Mhm.
So I would think that they can ask what the history has been in the past, with working with other providers or working with other services, to have an idea of where they're coming from also.
That's excellent, because if you ask what their experience is, they're going to want to share, like, hey, this happened, and then it's up to you to find out, like, take note and be like, how can we, change this? Me working with them, what can I do to help you? And those open up, different questions and other ways that you can work with the family.
Yeah,
So I'm just
absolutely. I know what hasn't worked in the past before as well.
right, and then you can avoid that.
Yeah,
So.
exactly.
We show respect, communicate with leaders. That's excellent. Christy says reaching out to connect proactively. Taking, oh, for the sake of time. Okay. Okay, cool. There's the pull up, guys. So just the two questions. Reach out to community centers, work as a team, effective communication, learn history and culture, be authentic in your approach, inquire about roles. Okay. And so, next question, how would FPA ask open-ended questions respectfully? So if you want to pop your answers in, and if one person would like to share while we go through the be curious. Yes, anytime. Like you can be curious and ask the questions as long as you're doing it in a respectful way. Like respectful, be curious. Just ask the question, and they're gonna tell you right away. Is like I don't care to answer that, and then be respectful if they don't want to answer that. Just ask what are they comfortable sharing, that you're open to learning about their culture, their community, even their family, because the family might have their own traditions as well, and that goes for everyone, not just native people. Like you can find out, how may I be of
I
assistance and
think
support. Yes. Oh, what was that?
um for me, I think also just asking permission.
Yes, that's a big one. Because they're gonna let you know yes or no, you can or can't do that. That's a good thing because that's respecting boundaries as well. What is the best way to address your name or address you and your team? Can you help me pronounce your name, title, team? Yes, yes, yes. What should I know about your community's history with outside providers? That's amazing. Thank you, Jennifer. Wendy says, would you mind sharing your cultural expectations with me? Yes, you can ask those as well, but you can also ask, like what even their expectations of you in general are. Like I would even take that out. I would just say, what do you expect of me as because in that way you're just having that one-on-one, and then they would maybe be open to sharing cultural. But you can also ask, is there anything you want to share culturally with me? So that would be good too. Um, Next question we have is, how would an FBA find out if there are drumming practices guests can attend? So you all pop in there. How would FBA find out there's a drumming practice you can attend? Exactly, Carrie. Ask. Yeah, like ask the people that you're working for. You can look up the different native service agencies. Ask if there's different field days, picnics, what cultural events can you attend? They're going to tell you, and they might even point you to, different social media events pages and whatnot. Oh, I'm sorry, TJ, I haven't done mine. I've been talking. Um, so those are all great. Just ask and just be open and have, let's see, just trying to make sure I covered everything really quick. Yeah, but just ask and be open and just be respectful when you go in. Don't go in with judgments. Don't go in with biases. If you're doing your research with history, you're gonna realize like and if you have questions about history, you can always ask the service agency workers or the leadership as well, and just say in a respectful way. I'm just asking, like I'm not sure, and I'm trying to educate myself. Is there a time you could share any books where we could learn more nonfiction or fiction? Um, I would have to. I didn't do any of that, but I can find books and I can give them to TJ and Ashley and maybe have them help pass those out.
Okay.
Is
I
there
just didn't know
any?
if there was something like off the top of your head.
Um, I'm trying to think. I know we were at the Film Finders the past 2 days this week, and one of them was the Iroquois woman. That's that's what they call us. So, but Iroquois Haudenosaunee women and their influence on the suffragettes. You would have to Google that, but there's like different ones that show like the impacts of like Haudenosaunee people. But there's so much books. I'll compile a list and I'll try to get it out to TJ by the end of the day so he can pass it out when he's able to.
Thank you.
But mhm. Go ahead, whoever was going to speak. I'm sorry. So this was where I was going to have any questions or thoughts, but we're running low, but we do have 3 minutes. Does TJ want to say anything? Does anyone else want to?
I want to say thank you for sharing this information, though I have some experience in myself. It's great getting a different perspective for someone who lives it, but also acts as a peer support, family advocate, and um, it was really needed. And I think this is one of the first ones I've seen outside of a conference be delivered like this and being so impactful. So thank you for everything that you've shared with us. It was great.
Oh, you're welcome. I feel like I taught too much at times, but it was like so much information to get out, and I apologize for not having enough time to get the questions. But if anyone would like to have questions, I don't know how we'd be able to do that, but
I'm gonna
maybe I can hang
request that TJ does a part two.
part two,
Because I
part
feel
two
like
for
there's so
question,
much
part two to like, yeah.
there's
So
I really, really appreciate you joining us and sharing, your wisdom and experience. And I think it's
thank
so
you.
important.
And for me, I just want to be humble and say that I wouldn't know this if I didn't have language teachers and cultural teachers, knowledge holders, the elders, all of the different clan mothers, all of the chiefs. Like, I took time to sit with them and go to different events over all these years. If I didn't reach out and do my own research, even as a Native American person, just because someone's Native does not mean that they're educated in traditional ways or protocols or procedures, or you have to take time to learn that. And it's like a lifetime of knowledge for these wampum makers to create these belts and to know the stories behind them. And I just want to say this the belts that you see here, these are the ones that are worn with their outfits. These are sashes and belts. And my good Bear Clan cousin, Marilyn Isaacs, is the one who made all these belts, and she shares belt making classes too, so people can learn how to make these for their traditional outfits. But a belt can take years to make depending on like the complexities, but yeah, there's so much to learn, and it's important to learn one new thing every day. So that's how I look at it. But for everyone, and I think I did my poll, TJ. Did everyone do your polls?
I just wanted to thank everyone for coming. I am putting a survey in the chat. We request that everyone just takes a few minutes and answer some of those questions. That'll help us kind of determine topics for the future. So please just take a few moments